Coming up on Arirang News, South Korean schools will reopen from tomorrow, starting with high school seniors. Ahead of that, the Education Ministry says it'll be on an emergency footing so it can respond to quarantine situations at any time or place. The U.S. biotech company Moderna says its first trial of a potential coronavirus vaccine has succeeded in producing antibodies and appears to be safe. That means it can move on to a second phase of trials. And South Korea's own biotech sector, together with the government, announces a strategy for the industry in the post-coronavirus era. That'll include more hiring, investment, and training to make the industry a global leader. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea plans to go ahead and reopen schools this Wednesday, gradually, starting with high school seniors. And ahead of that, the Education Ministry says it's switching to emergency mode and will be on full alert.
As of today, the Ministry of Education will operate an emergency situation room and switch to emergency work mode. We urge local offices of education to join us. We need to make sure we can respond 24 hours a day nationwide.
The minister explained that high school seniors will be required to go to school every day, but classes with many students should make active use of various methods, such as dividing up classes to make them less crowded. Students in other grades, when they start, will have to attend classes in person at least once a week. She also said if a student is suspected of having or is confirmed to have the coronavirus, he or she will be immediately isolated and transported by paramedics for treatment. And she urged students and parents to abide by the quarantine rules, such as staying home when they feel sick and wearing masks while at school. The U.S.-based biotech company Moderna says its first human tests of a potential COVID-19 vaccine indicate so far that it's safe and that it does the job of eliciting an immune response to the virus. That means it can start a second, larger phase of testing. Choi Jung-yoon reports.
U.S. biotech company Moderna says there have been some promising early results from its first human tests for a potential vaccine for COVID-19. According to Moderna, the vaccine produced virus-fighting antibodies in all 45 participants. Healthy volunteers between the ages of 18 to 55 were separated into 3 groups, and each received a 25, 100, or 250 microgram dose of the potential vaccine. The results show the levels of antibodies in the participants were similar or greater than those in patients who had recovered from the virus. The vaccine also produced neutralizing antibodies in at least 8 participants, which is considered important in acquiring protection.
Our anticipation is that it will be in the millions by the end of this year. It could be as high as 1 billion doses in 2021.
Approved by the U.S. FDA last month, Moderna will proceed with the second phase involving 600 people. And it expects a third to begin in July if the second phase goes well. It's said that if the vaccine is found to be effective and safe, it could be ready for commercial use in early 2021. Other biotech firms around the world have also started human safety trials. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, 8 companies are developing a vaccine based on a new technology. This includes Pfizer's trial involving 360 volunteers across the U.S., and the first subjects have already been injected with a dose. Britain's AstraZeneca will also produce 30 million vaccine doses in the UK by September. Biotech companies in South Korea are also accelerating their vaccine and treatment development. A consortium comprised of vaccine research institutes and medicine manufacturing companies has announced it has completed making the technical ingredients for a clinical phase 1 trial of the drug. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
Now, despite the pandemic, Seoul City Hall has continued to host meetings with officials from around the world, thanks to what's called the digital Civic Mayor's Office. Mayor Park Won-soon has used these high-tech facilities to hold some 20 international video conferences with international politicians and business leaders. All his counterparts need is a smartphone or a laptop. The digital Civic Mayor's Office was set up 3 years ago so officials can view information from across Seoul to aid their decision-making. The U.S. Golf Association's decided to cancel the qualifying tournaments for this year's U.S. Open due to COVID-19. This will be the first time there's been no qualifying tournament since 1924. Usually around half of the participants qualify through these tournaments, which give any golfer a chance to play at the Open. The tournament will take place in September at the Winged Foot Golf Club in New York State, having been postponed from June. South Korea's foreign ministry has strongly complained to Japan about its latest attempt to falsely lay claim to South Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo, and it's urged Tokyo to immediately withdraw such claims. The ministry also summoned Japan's #2 envoy to South Korea, Hirohisa Soma, to lodge a complaint. In its diplomatic blue book released Tuesday, Japan claimed that Dokdo is Japanese territory illegally occupied by South Korea. Seoul reiterated that Dokdo is, in fact, historically, geographically, and by international law, South Korean territory, and that Tokyo's claims cannot affect Seoul's sovereignty over Dokdo. The South Korean private sector and government have announced a set of strategies to promote the country's bio industry in the post-COVID-19 era. The Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy met today with industry leaders, including the CEOs of Samsung Biologics and Celltrion, which makes biosimilar medicines. The head of the Free Economic Zone in Incheon also took part. He said that by 2030, the Incheon zone will seek to increase the number of bio firms there from 60 to 700. It'll also grow the bio-related workforce from 5,000 to 20,000 and boost investment from 7 trillion won to 15 trillion won, or about $12 billion. Also, the Free Economic Zone in Chungcheongbuk-do province said it plans to attract more startups and train more biotech workers. The COVID-19 outbreak in South Korea has made it a lot harder to get employers and job seekers under one roof due to fears of potential cluster infections. So instead of holding crowded job fairs, companies have opted to hold their events and interviews virtually. Kim Dami has the details.
From uploading job applications to getting that acceptance letter, the entire job hunting process in South Korea has gone virtual for the first time. Instead of job seekers going to booths at a convention center, they're going to an online platform set up by around 30 local SMEs. Job seekers can freely ask their potential employers questions and vice versa from a convenient location of their choice.
I think it's efficient time-wise for both companies and job seekers in that we can skip unnecessary meetings, but it's also limiting, and it's unfortunate that I can show them directly my qualities as a person.
Though talking through a screen could have drawbacks, some feel they can communicate just as effectively as if they were meeting face-to-face.
These casual online interactions enable job seekers to ask questions freely, and we were able to give honest answers, which is more meaningful and realistic.
After uploading their resumes and self-introduction clips, job hunters will get a one-on-one final interview virtually.
We've decided to host the fair online this year because hiring and job hunting must go on despite this COVID-19 crisis. No contact hiring is very much needed, just like how the pandemic has changed work cultures.
Over the next 3 weeks, around 300 people will be newly employed. This virtual hiring process could be a fresh, approachable opportunity, especially for young job seekers who are used to mobile technology and to filming themselves. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
First quarter profits at major firms in South Korea have taken a massive hit. According to the Korea Exchange and the Korea Listed Companies Association, first quarter net profit for 592 companies listed on the country's benchmark KOSPI came to a total of about $9 billion, down roughly 48% on year. Operating profit was also down by around 31%. The damage was especially severe for companies in parts of the service sector that require face-to-face interaction. Their net profits were down about 76%. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you as always for making time.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, anticipation for a coronavirus vaccine helped send Wall Street surging overnight. The Nasdaq by about 2.5%, the S&P by more than 3%. What's the story in the global markets today?
Right. Looking into the U.S. stock market futures today, it seems to be a little bit struggling for direction on Tuesday. But yesterday we saw massive rise by the Wall Street companies. If you look at the Dow Jones, it jumped 912 points, or 3.9%. It is booking the best day since the April. Also, S&P 500 surged 90 points, 3.2%, and NASDAQ was up 2.4%. The level of rise for NASDAQ is a little bit lower because NASDAQ's been outperforming the most of the market in the previous several weeks. Now, the reason for such a strong rise is coming from the potential vaccine that could help to fight the coronavirus pandemic. While the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said over the weekend that it is forecasting a gradual economic recovery, lifting the sentiment that was quite poor the previous week. Also, with this, if you look at the U.S. Greed and Fear Index, it is rising from the very low level of single digit to now about 49. And it needs to go up well above 80 plus to see that if it is at a greed territories. So therefore, we think that there's more room for U.S. equity market to rise over the next few months, despite such a horrible economic numbers coming through. The possibility of economic recovery that you might see in the third quarter is giving hope. And if you look at it as cycle-wise, if you see continuation of liquidity injection that results into economic recovery, then maybe inflation recovery, you're looking at a cycle that it's going to last much longer than previously anticipated, which means that equity market will have more room to rise.
Well, Korean stocks also higher today on those Wall Street gains, more than 2% on the KOSPI. Tell us a bit more about the details there.
Yes, as you said, Korean equity market has risen quite sharply by 2.25% for KOSPI and 0.8% for KOSDAQ. Quite surprisingly, if you look at the KOSDAQ numbers, if you look at all the indices globally, KOSDAQ is one of the best performing index out of all, rising by more than 65% from the bottom. Clearly, the reason for that is because we have seen quite significant strong attractiveness towards the bio sector, and the KOSDAQ consists of 40% of the overall stocks related to bio. So that has resulted into quite strong recovery in the share prices. And also, the KOSPI has risen quite significantly, and even more than KOSDAQ today. It's because foreign investors were coming back to the equity market in a while. They've been net seller continuously. They bought 331 billion won worth of Korean equities in a KOSPI market. Clearly, we are seeing some buying going into the Samsung Electronics, the major large caps of Korea. The reason for that is because they are expecting that the overall liquidity condition continue to be okay, and economic recovery in a global scale might happen in third quarter. That results into too much of an under-owning of Korean equity at this time that is resulting into additional buying. We think that this trend could continue. And also, you are looking at the domestic liquidity being quite strong. So all in all, it seems that there's probably more room to go up for Korean equity as well.
And briefly, Mr. Yu, your view on oil, we're back now up to about $30 a barrel. Where do we go from here?
Right. I've been saying that the oil price needs to go up as you are seeing additional cut in the production. And due to that, demand and supply pictures is showing that oil price should be rising for well above $30, and it has reached that. As of now, it's about $32. The range bound, we are expecting around $30 to $40. I've been saying that continuously. The reason for that $30 to $40 range is because you need to keep the oil price below 40 in order to make the shale companies to reduce the production. And also, if you are seeing the transfer of cars from the gasoline-led to electric cars, that resulting into much lesser demand. So therefore, overall demand for the oil will be less. So therefore, we have a range bound, much lower than previous range bound. In the past, it used to be around $40 to $70 range. Now, we're probably looking at anywhere between $30 to $40 range. If that remains to be so, then inflation numbers should be quite reasonable going forward.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Now, new data show how South Korea's exports of culture have been growing in recent years. According to the Culture Ministry, cultural exports in 2018 were up 9% from the year before to surpass 10 trillion won, or about $9.6 billion US dollars. Most of that was in services related to computer game development at around $6.4 billion. That was followed by goods related to character franchises. Sales increased in all sectors in 2018 except for animation. South Korea's two biggest tech giants, Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, have seen an increase in their TV sales despite the shrinking global TV market. According to market tracker Omdia, overall shipments of TVs worldwide shrank in the first quarter by 16.4% on year to some 43 million units, but combined TV shipments by Samsung and LG were up 2.6% to more than 16 million units. Their combined market share rose by more than 7% to almost 39%. Samsung alone rose to around 24% and LG to more than 14%. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.